The infamous Patterson-Gimlin movie features a large ape-like beast that the filmmakers assumed to be the fabled Sasquatch, also known as Bigfoot. Despite multiple indigenous tribes in the Northwestern having orally shared stories of ape men in the wilderness for generations prior to Patterson and Gimlin's encounter, no one had ever captured the legend of Bigfoot on camera.
The story you are about to hear is one that you may have never heard before. Claims of this alternative story of the Patterson-Gimlin footage stems from an anonymous studio sound engineer from the Napa Valley. This story has a very different context and plot to the narrative fed in the mainstream. For the convenience of this story, we shall name our anonymous man here, Dave. Here is how the supposed story goes from the alleged holder of this alternative video.
The footage starts off shakily, then steadies to refocus itself on not one beast, but three. All three beasts are digging for something, a fair distance from the camera. The creatures then start walking down a trail and stop by a pond of water. They separate, but then soon regroup. It appears these creatures were doing some sort of surveillance of the area. The whole time the camera is on them without them realizing it. Suddenly a barrage of gunfire comes from the tree line and shoots these things cold. One of the beasts drops immediately while the other scurries into the woods. The third and remaining creature strangely just walks off. Someone kept taking shots at this one from a distance while it walked away. This is the creature depicted in the Patterson-Gimlin film.
Dave would claim that the footage was not his own but belonged to his uncle, now deceased, and he wasn't even supposed to have it. He claims his uncle lived in Yakima at the time and was friends with one of the trackers who was going out looking for these things. Dave's uncle went along with the group of 8 men, all heavily armed. His uncle somehow ended up with a copy of this film and then never mentioned a word to anyone. The men had no idea what they would run into in the woods, so they brought enough manpower and guns to start a small war. There were roughly 3 cameras rolling at all times, so they had much more than the 50 seconds that they show on television. The issue with all those involved was they had no idea whether what they were doing was legal, and felt the authorities would have screamed murder and hung them out to dry. Dave claimed there was a person with money who wanted to have a look at the film. He was a lawyer or businessman type. Others approached him, including an eccentric man named Eric Beckert, who started to harass him at one point and threatening to take Dave to the Supreme Court if he had to, but was eventually never heard from again. The final straw was when he returned home after a short time away and found his apartment broken into. Officers reported the intruders were clearly after something. To this day, the supposed footage sits in a safety deposit box that Dave has rented. Bob Gimlin and Roger Patterson had run into each other a few days earlier to the recording of the alleged Bigfoot by chance. Patterson had convinced Gimlin to assist him in locating the creature, upon hearing rumors of a set of mysterious footprints discovered in Northern California. Gimlin soon found himself mounted in Bluff Creek. Patterson's 16mm Cine Kodak camera and horse reins were in his hands as he galloped. The horses then started to whine, and a strong skunk odor filled the air just as Patterson put the camera back in his saddlebag. The 2 cowboys noticed a huge 6 to 7 foot beast walking between 25 and 100 feet distant as the horses began to kick in panic. Patterson yelled,
"Bob, protect me!"
as he dismounted and seized his camera. He made a brief rush ahead before crouching to steady his shot and started recording. Here is the footage narrated by Robert Gimlin himself.
When I first saw her, she was standing upright. I thought, you know, this is unreal. The way it was moving, the massive muscle. Roger had the camera up to his eyes and he stumbled and fell. Where you can see the shakiness part. I rode across the creek. I got off the horse and took my rifle out of the scabbard in case I had to make a shot. She made that turn to look. Kept right on walking. She went on up out of sight up that canyon. All this time I'm thinking, holy mackerels, these things do exist.
Watched. Though the Bigfoot sighting was briefly 59.5 seconds, Gimlin and Patterson had to cope with the aftermath for the rest of their lives.